and welcome to Bead. I'm Monique and today I'm showing my Christmas pattern for 2023. There are 3 schematics for the one design, which is kind of weird, right? Well, maybe, except we can get 3 different looks to the same design just by making some minor tweaks to the schematics. Now originally you guys were just going to get one plain design with one schematic, and then I thought, it's a Christmas design, it's got to have beads. The beads sit on the core thread, which changes our stitch count. So there's schematic number 2. And then I thought this would be really pretty in metallic thread, which it is. But once again, metallic thread changes our stitch count, and there's schematic number 3. Even though the cotton thread and metallic thread are both size 20, metallic is slightly thicker than cotton, so it alters the stitch count. Not so much around the rings and chains because it's a free-floating design. There is a little bit of wriggle room there, but it does become an issue when you're covering your cabone ring. So since I was drawing a 3rd schematic anyway, I decided to play with the stitch count on the final ring of the metallic wreath, just to mix it up a little bit. I will run through all the patterns before we pick up our shuttles, so don't worry too much if I've lost you at any point. Is now a good time to mention we're going to be working with 8 shuttles. It's actually not as bad as it sounds. It is a little fiddly, but while we have 8 shuttles connected to our work, we only have 2 hands. You can only work with one set of shuttles at a time, and I'll show you the process I use as we tat it together. You're going to need 4 sets of shuttles wound with continuous thread. You'll need a 40mm cabone ring. You might like to use stitch markers to make your joining picots. You'll need 208 seed beads if you're working the beaded wreath. I used 1.8mm seed beads. Now, your beads don't have to be 1.8mm, but keep in mind that the beads sit on the core thread. So the size of your bead is going to affect the size of your rings and the length of your chain. Because the bead sits in between the stitches, a larger bead is going to push your stitches further apart, while a smaller bead will allow them to sit closer together. The pattern can be found in the file section of the Bead Tatting group on Facebook. Now, I'm working in metallic thread today, but I am going to do a quick beaded ring and chain sample just for anyone who's unsure of the bead placement. There are timestamps down below for anyone else who'd like to just scoot through and get on with it. Are you excited? Let's go. Okay, I realise you can't see everything that I'm trying to show you. I've got the camera zoomed out as far as it will go. I'm going to zoom it back in a second. The main thing I wanted to show you is that, as I said earlier, there are 3 schematics. Each drawing has its own set of instructions written in matching colours. So we have the red, blue and green. If the instructions are written in black, then that set of instructions applies to all 3 schematics. The first wreath is a cotton one with no beads. We cover the cabone ring with a count of 4 picot 4. The throne ring starts with a chain of 17. The ring is a count of 3. Then we have picot 2 6 times, picot 3, and finish the chain with a count of 17. Work the center picot of the final ring quite long so it gives you a nice hanging loop. Plain chains have a count of 32. Pink dots in the beaded wreath indicate the position of the beads. Again, the throne rings start with a count of 17 for the chain. The ring is 3 a bead, 1 picot 1. Once again, the final ring has a long picot with 64 beads for the hanging loop. The beaded chains are a count of 1 bead 1. The plain chains have a count of 32. To cover the cabone ring with metallic thread, you'll need a count of 4 picot 4, picot 3, picot 3. The count for the throne rings and chains are the same as the plain wreath, but the final ring has a different stitch count, which is 3 picot 2, picot 2. Once again, we have that long picot for our hanging loop, 2 picot 2, picot 3. Your hanging loop can come off any of the rings. It doesn't matter as far as the position of the loop goes, but what it does affect is the loading order of your beads. I made my loop when I worked the last green ring. There's enough going on with the weaving. I didn't need this loop flapping around as well. This is a mini version of what I did. I'll leave a link down below for anyone who needs help with how to load the beads. Remember that the first bead onto the shuttle is the last bead to come off the shuttle. The first lot of beads are for my final ring. The green beads represent the 61 beads for my hanging loop, and these represent the 30 beads I need for the first 5 rings. To get our beads sitting in between the stitches, they need to be on the core thread. But we're making throne rings, so they need to be on shuttle 2. Work your chain, sit shuttle 1 down, take shuttle 2 and wrap your hand for a ring, keeping the beads out of the loom thread. Now normally tatters will let down the bead they need and wind the rest back onto the shuttle to keep them out of the way. But this ring has such a small count, you're working a couple of stitches and then needing a bead. There's only 6 beads in each ring anyway. So I take the 6 I need off the shuttle and just hold them back with my fingers while I work the double stitches that I need. So we have 3. Sometimes I do exactly that and come down and get in the way. Usually it's not too bad though. Just back that one out. I don't want him just yet. My 3 stitches. Let a bead down. We're working 1 and a picot. The next bead. Now picot. We're just repeating that around our ring. You're right to finish out your chain. To work the ring with the hanging loop, again it's a throne ring, so I've worked my chain, sit shuttle 1 down. We need to move 61 beads onto the loom thread as we wrap our hands. This is my representation of my 61 beads. Now that's going to be a lot of beads on your hand, so sit them as far back as you can. I have my 6 beads on my core thread, starting my ring as we did before, and we're working our 3, letting a bead down, working 1, picot, and 1 with our next bead, working 1, picot, and 1, now we're going to make our loop. So you'll need to pull off a fair bit of thread off your loom. Bring your beads up and fold them so that the end of the beads can come back to the start. Make sure they sit flat though. It's a little bit fiddly. You want them to sit like this. Hold that there while you make your next double stitch, and that will pull that in so that it sits together. Pull your next bead down, do your next stitch. And finish out your ring. And then you're right to finish out the other side of your chain for your throne ring. Chains are pretty self-explanatory, but I'll just quickly show you for anyone who's not sure. Again, the beads need to be on our core thread. And again, I like to leave mine loose just because we're doing one bead and one. So we've got one double stitch, a bead, and one, a bead, and one. And you're just repeating that for your beaded chain. Working with metallic thread is quite different to working with cotton thread. For one thing, it's very springy. Make sure you keep the ball in its bag. Each ball has, I don't know if you can see it, it's got a tiny little hole for you to run the thread through. You can see how the thread just wants to fall off the ball. This will tangle and create a hot mess if we don't keep it contained. The other thing you'll find with metallic thread is how brutal it is on your hands. I've strapped my middle finger because this is the finger I use to tension my thread. You'll be surprised at how quickly the metallic thread can cut you, especially with the repetitive nature of tensioning your thread. So I've just put a band-aid on. The trouble with the band-aid is that the thread doesn't run very easily. This stuff is amazing. It is found at your pharmacy. It sticks really well, it protects the skin, and the thread, I can't even get it off, the thread just glides over the top. Get that started. So I cut the length of it. And run that over the top of my band-aid. Okay, we need 4 sets of shuttles wound with continuous thread. I have set A, set B, set C, and set D. Sets B and D need to be 2 shuttle sets because we're going to use them to make throne rings. Set A and C can be ball and shuttle if you prefer, but we're doing a lot of weaving and I just think the ball makes it difficult and gets in the way. Starting with set A, I'm going to take shuttle 1, let shuttle 2 sit to the left. We're going to wrap the cabone ring with a count of 4 picot 4 until we have 23 picots. Now I'm working with metallic thread, which is slightly thicker than a normal cotton thread, so I'm going to do a count of 4 picot 4, 3 picot 3. To wrap the cabone, hold the thread on top of the ring with your thumb, allowing the thread to fall to the back. Use the pick on your shuttle to reach through the front. Pull up that thread to make a loop and pass your shuttle through. Pull that forwards, come from underneath, grab that thread, pull a loop to the back and pass your shuttle through. We have our first half and our second half. repeating that. Take the thread to the back, come through the front, pull up a loop, pull that forwards, come underneath, take the thread to the back, pull up a loop and pass your shuttle through. You want to pull your stitches pretty tightly, especially if you're working with metallic thread. They tend to loosen around the cabone ring. That's my first lot of 4. I'm going to get a stitch marker and pop that on my working thread. Working my next stitch. And that stitch marker is going to give me the joining picot that I need for the outside. I'm going to repeat this all the way around the cabone and I will see you on the other side. Okay, I've just taken all my stitch markers out. You can see they've left a tiny little hole for my joining picots. I have 23 picots. If you counted the joins around the cabone, you'll know there's 24. That's because the 24th picot isn't a picot. We're using the location of the 24th picot to climb out from the cabone ring and start our first chain. When we started, we had shuttle 1 and shuttle 2. Shuttle 1 has worked around the cabone and now sits on the other side of shuttle 2. We want to continue from this position to make our first chain. Shuttle 1 should be our core, but if we do that, our threads will cross. You always work with the thread that's on the top, never cross your threads. So we're going to swap shuttles. Shuttle 1 is now shuttle 2, which I use to set my hand up for a chain. Shuttle 2 is now shuttle 1, which will form my core, and we have a clear path for our stitches. Before we start, don't forget to think about your ends. If you've seen my other Tatalongs or taken my classes, you'll know I love magic loops. I'm going to use magic loops today, even though things do tend to get a little crowded with 8 tails and 8 loops at the end, but we just work through it. You can sew your tails in if you prefer, but remember you're going to have the chains weaving in and out of themselves as well, so that might make it a little tricky. Our first chain is one of 32. Sitting set A aside, take set B and lock join to the next picot. We're starting with a chain of 17. Sit shuttle 1 down, take shuttle 2 and wrap your hand ready for a thrown ring. Now your stitch count will vary depending on whether you're working with beads or not. I'm not going to read out the beaded stitch count because I did that at the start of the video. The stitch count I'm going to be working with is 3 picot 2 6 times, then picot 3. Close your ring. And set your hand up for the other side of your chain with a count of 17. Set B to the side, take set C and join to the next picot, joining with a lock join. We're chaining 32. Set shuttle C aside. We're attaching set D to the next picot. Doing the same thing we did for set B, chaining 17, working our thrown ring, and then finishing out the chain on the other side. Okay, I've backed the camera out and I've wound my shuttles up nice and short so that they fit in the frame. I want you to see what I do with my shuttles and the threads as we're weaving. I like to have a long length of thread coming from my shuttle because then I can brush that to the side, hold my work and work here, and the movement of that work doesn't change the position of the shuttles because I've got that longer thread. So I've just wound them in so I can show you how I do my weaving. So make sure that your chains aren't twisted and that they're all sitting nice and flat. We have A, B, C and D. We're going to weave chain A under, over and under. The weaving order is the same every single time, but the chains that are being woven will change. Let's do it and you'll see what I mean. We're going to take set A. Now I move my shuttles first and then move my chains. So set A is going under set B, over set C, and under set D.
and we're lock joining to the next picot. It's better if you don't split your ply. Continuing with set A, we work the next chain of 32 stitches. I'm going to sit that chain aside. Now, because I have a long length of thread going back to my shuttles, I can pull on the next chain and it untangles. So all of these chains, my shuttles haven't moved, all of these chains are in the order I need them to be. Now we're going to take set B, and again we're going under, just get the tails out of the way so you can see a bit better. I'm going under, over, and under. We're lock joining to the next picot. Continuing with that set, we make our next chain and throne ring. Sit set B aside, straighten out your other chains. We are taking set C, and we are going under, over, and under. Lock join to the next picot. And then we're starting that chain again. 32. The last chain in the set D, is going under, over, and under. And again we're lock joining to the next picot and then repeating that chain thrown ring count. Okay, coming back to our first free chain, we're ready to repeat our weave. Don't look at what's happening back here, that's only going to confuse you. We're concentrating on our free chains. Make sure they're not caught up or crossed over each other. Then we start again. We're weaving. Our first chain is under, over, and under. Where you'll lock join to the cabone and make your chain of 32 again. Repeat this process all the way around and I'll come back to show you how to make the last weave and finish everything off. Okay, I've left pretty long tails and cut my shuttles off. They probably don't need to be that long, but it just gives me a little bit more to work with. We're going to weave set A for the last time. So we're going to go under, over, and under. The magic loops make it a little bit hard to see as well. Take the core thread of set A. We're going back into where we started with set A. Take the core thread through to the back. And then on the back, amongst all of this tails and magic loops, we're going to tie a square knot. So with our square knot, we're doing right over left, and left over right. Now you can weave all of your chains and then get rid of the tails at the end, but I find it's easier if you get rid of them as you go, because it clears up the mess that we have happening here at the back. So you might notice I've got yellow loops and clear loops, and I do that because it just helps me find which tail of the loop, of the magic loop, is which. Let's put them through that I can now cut off. Now I'm looking for that magic loop in that first chain, which is hiding in there. Coming back to the front, we move on to our next set, which is set B, and we're going under, over, and then it needs to come under the first one of set A. So what I'm going to do is use my crochet hook to get that core thread. Just tighten up my stitch there. Using my crochet hook to get that core thread through to the front. Now I can use my needle to take it back through that picot to the back. And we tie a square knot like we just did with the first one. Getting rid of our tails. to the front. Our next weave is going under, over, and under. Back for our square knot. And to the front for our last one, we're going under, pulling it through to come over the red. And under. This last weave will be quite tight. Again, it's going back into set B where we first started. Into the pack for our square knot. Now I just need to go and shape some of my rings and chains to sit nicely.
See, that's not so scary. I hope you enjoyed the video and I wish everyone a really safe and Merry Christmas. See you later.